Hello, everyone, and welcome to Abnormal Investigations. I have another one I'm going to share with you guys. It just almost did not make it to the regular show. This one was almost a Patreon, but I think we can make it be okay. This one, again, is a sad one. I would ask everybody to please be kind to the people that share these encounters. It is hard enough for them to do it, and whenever we try to pick it apart, sometimes it hurts their feelings, because you have to remember they are giving us their encounter, and then we have a lot of time to try to pick it apart. I'm not saying we have to believe every encounter. Just if you disagree, do it professionally, and always try to leave somebody, with their integrity. You should always, I believe, try to do that. So this person here is going to tell us how they actually lost their dad. Okay, so this touched really hard home to this person. They actually lost their dad. So it says the trouble started whenever we moved into the old home that we had lived in. Across the bridge was an old single lane bridge with splintering wood planks. One of the old bridges. It spanned a creek that our house was by, that we lived by, that bordered our property. Its iron bolts groaning with every car that crossed, which wasn't many unless they were coming to our home. We was the only one on the other side of the bridge. My earliest memories are threaded with the sounds of that place. The sighing of the wind through the tall pines, the murmur of the water, and later, the things that weren't so easy to explain, and something that I will never get over. The trouble started not with a bang, but with a whisper. Or more accurately, I guess I should say, a whistle. It began as a faint, high pitched note, a sound we all at first dismissed as the wind. But it grew, and it got more and more complex, the tune, like someone practicing a melody with only one breath, but they seemed to never run out of air. Could you imagine, guys, something that large, the lung capacity? And with the tune came a low guttural howl, deep and mournful, that seemed to vibrate the very timbers of our home. Mom and Dad would exchange worried glances. I would catch them, but they told my sister and me it was just a fox or a stray dog. But it didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded like something that was trying to imitate a human. That's what really bothered me. And I could see the look in Mom and Dad's faces also. Then came the darkness. It was always at night, and always after the whistling and the howling had reached a fever. The lights would flicker once, twice, and then the lights would die completely, plunging us into the kind of darkness you don't want to be in. Out here in the country, whenever our power went off, it was a suffocating blackness, Mike, that only exists in the country, I'm sure you know. And the bad thing was, our electrical meter, the one that controlled our power, was in a rickety wooden shed across the bridge. One of them, my parents meaning, would have to go out and cross the bridge to go to the breaker and to flip it to turn our power back on. I hated it. I would press my face against the window and I would watch, heart hammering, as they crossed the bridge with the lantern swinging wildly. Sometimes Dad would come back with a story about finding a meter's metal door ajar or the lock pried off. Other times, he would say nothing at all, just a look that he would give my mom, kind of like, it did it again. One night, the power went out, and the howling was closer than it had ever been. It sounded like it was coming directly from the creek bed itself. I'll go, Mom said, her voice thin with a fear. I could tell Mom was hiding it. She was trying to be tough, but I could tell she was hiding it. Now I watched from the window with my hands pressed against the flat glass, and it was cold. I remember the cold, and the glass was wet. Her lantern's light bobbed nervously as she crossed the bridge. I saw her stop on the far side, hold the lantern high, peering down into the dark water beneath the bridge. I knew that Mom was afraid, and that's when I saw it too. Though I didn't understand what it was, a figure crouched in the dark with legs that bent the wrong way. I could tell that in the moonlight. And two glinting eyes. Mom dropped the lantern in the fleeting chaos of light. She ran. I saw a face that was more goat than a man. A sickening goat-like laugh echoed up from below, and she ran back to the house, screaming like. I had never seen my mom like that before. She was so terrified, so afraid, and crying. Dad could barely calm her down, and we're sitting there in the pure darkness because she had not yet made it to the shed. Dad went and turned it on. Excuse me. He was afraid, but he done it anyways, knowing we needed the light. Now, after that, things got worse. The darkness came earlier and lasted longer. Mom would lock the door with shaking hands, and we'd sit huddled together in the little bit of light of the candles casting monstrous shadows. We had gotten sometimes now. We wouldn't even go turn it on till morning after that happened to Mom. My dad, though, he had kind of a stubborn side. He refused to run out of his own home. He started taking a shotgun with him whenever he would go to the shed. He said he would sit in darkness no more. One particular violent night, I remember this very well, Mike. I will never forget it. A storm that rattled the windows and felt like the world was ending. The power went out again, but the storm had not yet reached us, and Dad did not want to sit in a dark house with a major storm approaching. Dad grabbed his coat, and Mom told him, "Please don't go. Let us just use the candles. We'll be just fine. It'll be morning soon." But he just said, "I will not be scared out of my own house." Dad was very particular about not being afraid of what was below the bridge. You know, a lot of people feel that way. My grandpa was that way too. Anyways, Dad went out the door, shotgun and lantern in hand. But he just said, "I won't be scared. I promise I'm not afraid, and I won't be scared. I'll have the lights on in a jiff and back home." He kissed all of us and told us he loved us, and he went out the door. We waited. The howling and the whistling rose above the wind, a duet of madness, but then a new sound cut through it all. A high-pitched shriek, and then silence, and then the screaming of what sounded like a goat trying to howl like a wolf. Just picture a goat that tried to howl. That's the best I can tell you. There was 2 shots from Dad's double-barrel shotgun. I remember all of us jumping and flinching at the same time. Watching my dad walk across that bridge that night with the lantern was the last time I would ever see my dad alive. That's why I will never forget that night. Dad never came back. They found my dad 12 miles downstream, lodged against a snag in the river. His body, they said, was twisted and battered. I later found in my later years, as my mother would not tell me until I was a man. The police and later the papers blamed it on a bear attack. But the coroner had told my mother something that only she would ever whisper to us. She knew him personally. The coroner told my mom that Dad's face, he said, was frozen in a mask of pure terror. But that wasn't the strangest part. He had never, in all his years, seen a body with such deep, gouged scratches. They were not from a bear, he told her, but from something that had grabbed and ripped with long, curling nails. Something with a wicked, goat-like hooves had walked across my dad's back that weighed, he guessed, at least 300 pounds. He said the cuts were so deep into my father that whenever they embalmed him, it was hard to keep the fluid inside of his body. And that's why it was a closed casket. We was always told it was a bear as I was young. I remember as a child, Mike, we moved out the very next day, and I've never been back. But every time I hear a whistle in the wind or the distant bark of a dog, I think of that old bridge. And I remember the goat-looking man under the bridge with his whistling and howling, who wanted our home so badly that he would take my dad away. We hadn't done anything to the goat man, not fired one shot at him, not done one thing. All we done was live there. But I guess it didn't want us there, or at least it didn't want Dad there. I could tell you someday where this bridge is at if you would like to go there. I wish you really wouldn't. But the old bridge now is, well, it looks different. And I remember where our old home place was, and I could probably show you around if you're interested. It's not that far from you, probably 30, 40 miles. You know, it's hard whenever you hear somebody, they lose a loved one, a father that leaves, and the last you see is him leaving. You're afraid there's a storm coming. Everybody's terrified at that moment. I'd be scared. But then your dad to be found, and the coroner says, I've never seen anybody that's face looked in so much terror and his body shredded beyond belief. I mean, my God. Walked across his back with hooves that cut into his skin because of the weight of it. What the hell was at the bottom of that bridge? I'm going to tell y'all a story now. Y'all get a little extra story with this. You see, a long time ago, my mom, her dad, her mom, and then my uncle, I won't use his name because I don't have permission. They had all went fishing one night with my Uncle Bob too. They were at an old bridge around here, and while they were fishing, now this place has had a lot of weird things happen at it, don't get me wrong. This is just one of the stories. But while they were fishing, Mom said they heard something walking behind them, and my mom was just a little girl at this time. They ignored it for a while, until whatever it was walked across the bridge on two legs. They could see it up above them. Now, this is an old iron bridge, guys. It had the, looked like the railroad ties that went across it. You had to keep your tires on it when you drove across, with a long drop down to the river. Whatever it was walked across that old wood plank bridge, and they said you could hear its hooves walking. Click, click, click. And it was on 2 feet, and it was enough that my uncles and my grandpa decided it was time to leave. And they weren't afraid of much. I mean, one of my uncles, he could hold his own and did many, many times. He was a logger with my grandpa. These were not little men, they were professional loggers. My other uncle in Vietnam. These were not men that were afraid, and they were armed back in those days also. But they felt that it was time to leave also. Just like I felt it was time to leave tonight on the members only Boots on the Ground. You all saw how close that got to me. And I was ready to leave. And when it screamed at me and started making different noises, first one thing then another, tonight was pretty bad, and it was time to go. That was a scary time. It really was. I was glad to get out of there, guys. I hated leaving so early, but I knew it was time to leave. It was getting too bad, and you all saw how close it was. So as always, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And I think their dad would have been better served if he would have just used the candles that night. What do you guys think? Did he push too much? Is it because he pushed that happened? Let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.